Well, how convenient.
Yeah, sure was.
Where else can you have this much fun on a Wednesday night?
I
Right.
know.
Okay, we should be live on Facebook at this point in time. I'm checking. Let me turn off this microphone, and I think we are ready to go. How is everyone?
Well, we're all just fine. Thank you very much.
I am fine.
Fine.
Thank you. We've got Gene and Dale and Mike and Sheila on our panel thus far, and more to come.
And Kia.
And Kia just got here. Hey, Kia. It's good to see you here.
He's muted.
He is muted.
Greetings. How's everybody?
There she is.
Hey, I'm okay. I hope you are.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So Patricia's talking to her head administrator right now, and she'll come when she's done with the phone call. But we're glad to have you all here, and we're going to get started. I've got a really strange thing to share with you briefly on a PowerPoint. I hope it won't take any more than 10 or 15 minutes, and then we can discuss. The topic has to do with the baby Jesus, or maybe just Jesus in general, and ancient tourism. I know we think about tourism today to the Holy Land, people making their trips to Israel, Palestine, Jordan, and other places in the area, maybe Egypt or Turkey or Greece, other biblical places where biblical things took place, especially in the New Testament, which interests Christians the most. But there was tourism going on back in the day, and I can prove it to you, and I can show you how I think it worked. And I think I've got evidence at Absalom's tomb that might surprise you. Dale knows where that is. It's in the Kidron Valley at Jerusalem. It's between Mount Moriah and the Mount of Olives. It's next to the Garden of Gethsemane. And it's not Absalom's tomb, but that's what they call it. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. And if you're ready, are you ready? I'm going to show you a PowerPoint. Okay. Let's see if you can see any of this.
Yes.
All right. Is there any big gray blobs blocking anything too bad right now?
It just got moved to the top, and that helped, I think.
Okay, good. All right. So let me orient you to this. Can you see that tower-looking, monument-looking thing down there right in the middle?
Yes.
It's got a big hole in the front of it.
Yep.
Yeah, this is called Absalom's tomb, and it's in the Kidron Valley, as you can see marked there on the lower left. Upper right, you can see the top of the Mount of Olives up there on the right. And those gold domes that you see upper left that are onion-shaped, that's the Russian Orthodox Church of Mary Magdalene. And then just to the left of that and down the hill is Gethsemane. So just to let you know, you're in a biblical area. Tons of stories could be told from just standing where you are right now. But let's talk about that monument. Is that Absalom's tomb? Well, who is Absalom? Anybody want to jump in? Absalom is one of King David's sons. And he and his father were in intense life and death threatening conflict with one another. And that story you can find by going back to, I want to say 1 Kings. Yeah, 1 Kings. It may also be in Chronicles in some other version. So King David lived, let's roughly say 1,000 years before Jesus, around 3,000 years before today. That would be about 1000 BC. So this tomb dates to the 1st century AD. So this tomb was built 1,000 years after Absalom died. So if it's his tomb, he sure did die a long time before they buried him there, because that tomb did not exist. in King David and Absalom's day. So now you've got a basic orientation to the Kidron Valley, Gethsemane, Mount of Olives. Let's take a look at a few more pics, if it will let me.
They may have wanted to preserve him because it says he was the handsomest king in the kingdom,
Yep.
handsomest man in the kingdom.
They said that about Absalom.
Yeah.
He should get into a lot of trouble with his dad. For
It
being
says in-
good.
it's quoted in, or not quoted, but told that's what 2 Samuel 14:25 indicates.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So he's not buried here is, I guess, the point I'm trying to make. It's always been called Absalom's tomb so far for centuries, so far as anyone knows, but it's not Absalom's tomb. In fact, it's been misidentified a lot, as you're about to see. So here we are looking south down the Kidron Valley, and the Mount of Olives rises to the left in this picture, and Mount Moriah, on which the temple and on which Jerusalem is built, rises to the right. And you can see the monument sticking up in the middle, this special sort of conical shaped roof is mimicking an Egyptian style that was popular. And along the bottom, the columns and the capitals being Ionic are mirroring the Alexander the Great and the Greeks from 300 and something years before the time that this was built. We think this is a priestly tomb. It has room for people to be buried in, just a few people to be buried inside, but the complex extends back into the mountain, and it has many different burial chambers back in there to wander through and get lost and frightened in, because it's not exactly the safest place to walk through alone. It'd be kind of like going through an area in downtown Atlanta where homeless people are sleeping in the park, and you might feel a little awkward just deciding to walk through that, in the night. I felt like that down here. I wasn't exactly feeling it. I'd been warned about the area too, so I kind of tried to stay where other people were around. So here's a drawing of it from about, maybe a photograph from about 100 years ago. Do you see the big difference between the base of the monument in the picture on the left and the base of the monument on the picture on the right? On the right, you have a large pedestal that's been uncovered by archaeologists. On the left, you have piles of stones all around it. Why? Now, normally you do have some accumulation of soil and that kind of thing over time, but there's another dynamic going on here. Absalom was so hated that for centuries, both the first and second centuries, I think the first and second centuries BC, and then on to the 4th century AD, as Jewish pilgrims came to Jerusalem, and then the Christians started doing it too. They would it was a tradition that as you went by on your bus, your donkey, your camel, and you're on your tour of Jerusalem, and you come all the way from Greece or somewhere, and the tour guides, the people who take you along, the people who own your animals that you're traveling on and put you up in tents, these people have a routine, just like the bus drivers and tour guides today. And when they got to Absalom's tomb, they said, here's Absalom's tomb. He was an evil, evil, evil man. And to this day, we throw rocks at his tomb. And I invite you to throw rocks at his tomb. So it's just pockmarked with all of these rock holes from people throwing things at it for centuries. And then around 400 AD, from what I read, it stopped. People stopped throwing rocks at it. And I think I know why. And it has to do with Luke 2, primarily. Can you see that the base is covered in rocks on the one on the left? I'm hoping you see that. You can,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Behind the donkeys.
Yep.
Okay, so here's what it looks like just on the inside.
Wow.
And that's called an arcosolium on the right. It's not the most common, but used by Hebrew people of that time frame. They use coke tombs. They're called coquine. And they're just like a file drawer. You just slide someone into the file drawer and you cap it with a stone. Well, you don't do that with an arcosalium. It's got an arch. That's what arco means, arch. It's an arched crypt, and you would just lie the body there. You wouldn't seal it. So usually, I mean, that would be someone really wealthy, and there would be no one else buried in there for a while, and you're not going to be using it for anything else. You're going to be protecting it. So, you know, even though it's a large tomb, you've got somebody laid out there and it's not capped. So it's going to stink really bad, and you're going to be looking at a dead body the minute you walk through that door. So the burial practice with an arcosalium was a little bit different, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And I'm winging some of this from previous learning. I didn't look it all up. Please take everything with a grain of salt. But I've taught it enough that I think I can give you factual information. Now, this is Josias. And one of his students was taking photographs of Absalom's tomb late in the afternoon at a certain time of year, so that the light struck the side of the tomb, those blocks right there on the right where it says carved stone blocks. Okay. And when the light hit it hit the side of the tomb at an oblique angle, she could see that there were two inscriptions. One of them was horizontal and one of them was vertical. And they were scratched on there. It wasn't an official, they were scratched later by someone else around, they think around 400 BC. And I'll tell you why in a minute. But Josias, see that thing on the left? That's not an artifact. He made a plaster cast of that inscription. And this was 2003, and the war had started back in March, the Gulf War. And people weren't traveling because of the Intifada that started in September of 2000 and continued into 2001 and 2. And then in 2003, there was war in the region. And so people weren't traveling to Israel, and Joe wasn't making any money. And so he made that plaster cast, and he came back to the States, and he started calling friends and colleagues to go speak and tell them about this plaster cast and about this inscription that his student had found and photographed. And so he packed that thing up and he brought it to the States, and he called me and he said, maybe you could set me up with some of the colleges and churches and we could just kind of do a little mini tour there in Mississippi. And I said, you got it. And I set him up in several different places over a few days. And we went around in his station wagon, and he had an old station wagon that he drove from all the way from Detroit. And in the back of it was this fragile plaster cast of an inscription written in Greek from the 4th century or so, 4th or 5th century AD. So what does it say? What do we got here? What can Joe tell us? All right, so he used a negative here this is what the actual two inscriptions look like. Now, one of them says, Simeon, who was a very just man and very devoted old person and waiting for the consolation of the people. This passage is identical to Luke 2:25 as it appears in the Codex Sinaiticus, a 4th century version of the Bible. If it's identical to a 4th century version of the Bible, what do we know about this scratched inscription? It was after the publishing of the Codex Sinaiticus. It's got to be older than that. So we know this was at the earliest 4th century, or maybe 5th, but it could be as late as 6th or 7th. But the reason I think that it's 4th or 5th is because they stopped throwing rocks at it at about the same time that the inscriptions were out. All right, so the other inscription says, this is the tomb of Zechariah, the martyr, the holy priest, the father of John the Baptist. So we've got a Bible verse from the New Testament, and we've got a memorial inscription that says this is the tomb of Zechariah. So this was believed in the Byzantine period, and I've got writings to show you in a minute about someone else who is going to be buried here, but we definitely are getting traditions that Simeon and Zechariah were buried here from the Christians. Now, so what happened? How did it go from being hated Absalom's tomb, which it never was, to by the 4th century, being shown to the pilgrims, to the tourists who were coming from Europe. They were being shown this monument, this impressive monument, and they're shown an inscription on the side that this is where Simeon and Zechariah are buried. And by the way, James, the brother of Jesus, too, got thrown in, which I'll show you in a second. So 3 famous New Testament characters supposedly buried here. But the thing is that the inscriptions aren't original. They're added 400 plus years after the tomb was made, and no one was in it by that time. And would Zechariah and Simeon and James all have been conveniently buried in this same rich man's vastly monumental tomb? I don't know. Doesn't seem likely to me. Zechariah was a priest, and he could have been buried in a priestly tomb with other priests of his family, I suppose. But this inscription is 400 years after he died. And I think what this is about is we want to turn this into a better tourist stop. And what we can do is we can say, instead of that this is Absalom's tomb, we can tell the tourists this is where Zechariah and Simeon and James, the brother of Jesus, are buried.
What about John?
What happened?
John was beheaded. I mean, would they allow him to be put in?
No, not John, his father.
Oh, the father of John. Okay,
Yeah, the father of John, Zechariah.
I got it.
Yeah, so John the Baptist's father, Zechariah, Simeon the prophet from Luke 2, and James, the brother of Jesus, who appears in the Gospels and the book of Acts, more predominantly in the book of Acts. And he's mentioned by Paul in his letters, as well as Peter, I believe. All right, so there's your inscription, and there's my explanation. This was written here by tour guides. That's my thesis. This was written by tour guides to change Absalom's tomb into a better stop for Christians.
Wow.
And it's not based on fact. It's just based on, they need to tell the tourists something. And that still goes on today. They take, I can't tell you how many tourists I've seen getting off the bus and being shown in Jericho a sycamore tree and told this is the exact tree that Zacchaeus climbed into.
Zacchaeus
Poor
was
guys
a
are
little
still
man.
making up. Yeah, that little guy.
Who says he's little?
Fred Craddock said he was little. And Fred
That's the
Craddock
pot calling the kettle black.
No,
Fred Craddock was about 3'1". So we have the prophet Simeon story, and I want you to know that they had an opportunity to add the prophetess Anna to this tomb and didn't, which is a shame. But 2 prophets spoke of the infant Jesus when he was taken to the temple by Mary and Joseph 33 days after he was born, so that Mary could be purified because childbirth makes you unclean, impure. And he had to pay at the temple for that sacrifice. And he also had to dedicate their firstborn son to the Lord, which is a complicated ceremony where you say, do you want to give this child to God, or do you want to keep this child and raise yourself? And you can leave your child in the temple to be raised with the priests. Or, I mean, it's hard to believe that they did that. And nobody said, I'm leaving my baby. You know, this was just part of the ceremony. You dedicate the child to God, but you can also take the child home if you choose. But this is like the first fruits, the firstborn son, whatever. So there was a man in Jerusalem named Simeon. This man was righteous and devout, looking forward to the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit rested on him. It had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not see death before he saw the Lord's Messiah. Guided by the Spirit, Simeon came to the temple. And when the parents brought in the child Jesus to do for him what was customary under the law, Simeon took him in his arms and praised God, saying, Master, you are dismissing your servant in peace according to your word, for my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light of revelation to the Gentiles, and for glory to your people Israel. And the child's father and mother were amazed at what was being said about him. Then Simeon blessed them and said to the mother Mary, this child is destined for the falling and the rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be opposed, so that the inner thoughts of many will be revealed, and a sword will pierce your own soul too, Mary. There was also a prophet, Anna, or prophetess, the daughter of Phanuel, of the tribe of Asher. She was of great age, having lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage, and then as a widow to the age of 84, she never left the temple, but worshiped there with fasting and prayer night and day. At that moment she came and began to praise God and to speak about him, Jesus, to all who were looking for the redemption of Israel. And I want you to imagine your tour guide or your priest or whoever's leading your group in 400 AD, and they walk up in front of this monument and they show you the inscription and they read you that. It's not so different from what we do today in the Holy Land with the pilgrim groups that come. You go to a certain site, you read certain scriptures, and then you go on to the next one. There's an itinerary. And all the guides and all the bus drivers know the basic itinerary, which Peter and Dale and I do not follow. Just thought you'd want to know. Because it's based on tradition and shopping. All right, so they also said that James, the brother of Jesus, was buried there. Clement of Alexander relates that James was thrown from the pinnacle of the temple and was beaten to death with a club. Hegesippus cites that the scribes and Pharisees placed James upon the pinnacle of the temple and threw down the just man, and they began to stone him, for he was not killed by the fall. And one of them, who was a fuller, took the club with which he beat out clothes and struck the just man on the head, sort of a coup de grace with a club that he used for dyeing and swishing around clothes when he dyed them in liquid to change, them to pretty colors, whatever color he wanted. And so he's a dyer of fabric. And so James suffered martyrdom, and they buried him on the spot, and the pillar erected to his memory still remains close by the temple. Well, some people have taken that to be a reference to Absalom's tomb, but the description is not specific enough that you could make that conclusion. By pillar, it usually means standing stone, which usually is something that would look somewhat like a headstone. Well, this is clearly not a headstone we're talking about when we look at Absalom's tomb. We're looking at an elaborate rock cut tomb. It's cut right out of the bedrock, that white limestone. And but imagine you're a pilgrim from Europe and you need somebody to guide you in Israel, and you get this guy and his camels, and maybe his wife and kids and stuff are helping, and they take you along the road, and they have everything marked out in numbers, and then they know that when they get to Jerusalem, that when they're leaving and headed toward the Mount of Olives, that they'll go stop by Absalom's tomb, and they will tell them this is where James died and was buried. This is where Simeon died and was buried. And this is where John the Baptist's father, Zechariah, was died and buried. And they read stories about them and have service and prayer. And then they move on to, stop number 2 for the day on the itinerary. I know it's hard to believe that that was going on, but we've actually got lots of proof that it was going on, because the priests back in the Byzantine period, which is from the early 300s up to the late 600s in Palestine. It would go farther than that in some areas. But during that time frame, those 400 years or so, 500 years or so, we've got ruins that the priests, the Christian priests had monasteries built, and they had like hotels or hostels built next to them where pilgrims could come and spend the night and stay, and then visit all the holy sites around that area. They're everywhere. They're all around the Sea of Galilee. For example, at Gergesa, we've got at Kursi, we've got a monastery. and it's got a hotel next to it that they built for pilgrims. So I think we may not realize that tourism is not a new thing in the Holy Land. Pilgrims have been going to Israel for centuries, for millennia, including during this time frame when they would have been taking pilgrims by Absalom's tomb and not throwing rocks at it, but reading scripture and praying and remembering Simeon and James and Zechariah. You got it? I'm done. Let me close this thing. How do I close it, Patricia?
The movement button.
And then stop the share. And then close, minimize that. And I can come back up here to this. Yeah, so I'm particularly interested in Dale's response to that, because Dale is a person who has probably traveled to Jerusalem some 15 times.
Yeah, probably.
And how would you respond to what I've been saying about tourism and Jesus?
I think you're very accurate about the idea of tourism when they're using Jesus and whomever to make a profit, and they're using whatever means to do that. And I think the thing about the Society of Biblical Studies is that we don't do that. We don't tour. We do interpretations of sites and try to allow people to experience from scripture what those sites actually mean. We don't have people guiding us around like sheep who take us to certain places, to shop certain places, and it's like we're herded along. I know we have an itinerary, but it's an itinerary that's based on scripture and history, I believe, and interpretation.
Yeah.
So that makes a big difference.
It does. And because, you and I and Gene and others who were pastors who went there for that first time, one of the difficult things was the fact that we knew so much more about the Bible than our guide did, that you were always frustrated. Well, if he's got the Bible this wrong, what else is he telling me that's wrong? And I was new to all that archaeology stuff. I hadn't, in the early 90s, I hadn't gone there yet, Then I went in I think it was 92 for the first time. And holy cow, I was so frustrated and so upset. I felt like we were being robbed. But we had a pastor's week following the regular trip. It was an extension. We did it at the Jerusalem Center with Jim Fleming and Charles Page and that whole crew, which I ended up working with. And they were doing good work. They were actually doing exegesis that was renewing and responsible. They were transforming pilgrimage from something that actually was, instead of, shopping continually and making it a commercial endeavor, that really brought spirituality and contemplative thought and prayer to the process. Plus, we were engaging in a way that other teaching organizations there and tourist organizations there didn't. We were engaging in conversations with people that we hired to bring in from various perspectives, Palestinian, Jewish, and Christian, to talk to us about what the sociological and political and economic situation is for them right now. So you engage the culture. And so that's a prophetic, to me, that's a prophetic ministry that the SBS does, is that we're engaging the culture instead of going from shop to shop and getting as much a percentage cut as we can from these people while they're there, which is what tour groups do. And I imagine it wasn't so different back then, Dale, when I look at the fact that they would scratch this graffiti-like inscription on the side of this first century tomb, and so that they could tell people, see, the inscription says he was buried here.
Remember the time we did the goofy picture of you on your knees in Jericho?
Yeah, it's like Dorf does Jericho.
But my point is, the guy there had his wares set up, and just as soon as the bus stopped and we started getting off, he started hollering, "Welcome, welcome, the 2,000-year-old Zacchaeus tree." I mean, that's what he was saying.
Yes.
And basically, he was trying to get you to come over and not only look at the tree, but buy what he's trying to sell. You know,
Yeah.
tourism. That's what he wasn't really caring about the Zacchaeus tree. He was more concerned about tourism. And I think that's what's going on, what you're talking about then as tourists, and also even today in the situation where people are there to make money and they'll use whatever means to convince you that this is a holy site.
Yeah, well, how do you think that keffiyeh got on my head? I mean, what they'll do is they'll put it on your head so you can have your picture taken, and then they push you to buy it.
Yeah, my first keffiyeh on my head at the Great Pyramids was sitting on a camel, getting my picture taken with a handout going, "You pay me."
Yeah,
Of course.
Yeah.
Of
but
course.
that's no matter where you go.
And it may, my point is it may be no matter where you go, but especially in the Holy Land and including the ancient Holy Land, where pilgrims have been going for thousands and thousands, 2,000, 3,000 years. People pilgrimage to Jerusalem to go to the temple,
Well, there are some legitimate sites. I mean, this is some kind of a legitimate site. The house in Capernaum, Peter's house, it's venerated as a legitimate site. I mean, if you go downstairs in the Church of Resurrection and behind the walls, there are places where pilgrims have carved crosses where they have, come to this venerated site. I mean, there are legitimate places, but in the whole process, there's people who are wanting you to be a tourist to also purchase, buy, or give financially.
Now, I have never been there. So if they're telling me this is the right site for Peter's house, how do I know that's true? I mean, I'm not being smart. I
No,
don't
yeah.
understand.
Yeah, I mean, how many times did we say that this morning, Gene, in your Bible study? I mean, how do you know who to trust? Okay, let's say you go to 4 doctors. You might get 4 different diagnoses. You might get 4 different treatment plans, and one of them may be surgery. Who's right? And so when you are looking for a pastor, and you're hiring a pastor, how do you know whether his preaching is biblical or not? You might not.
Well, you
But
listen
you just
to
might like it. You
documentaries.
might listen to his style, or you might have other reasons for choosing the guy that you did, that he was presentable as opposed to the other candidates less presentable in some way. But the question is, who's trying to tell you the truth? And so this is a good example. This is a good metaphor for the ways in which people are misleading with the Bible and with preaching and teaching today, this Absalom's tomb, because here is an authentic 1st century, probably priestly tomb in Jerusalem's Kidron Valley. It's authentic. It was never Absalom's tomb. That was tradition. That was Hebrew tradition. And it was never James's, probably never James's or Zechariah's or Simeon's tomb. But it was convenient to tell people that as a stopping place because it's impressive. And they get to read and they get to have worship and they get more money at the next shop. So that's not authentic. That's all tradition. So my job when I'm teaching a group in Israel is show people the difference between what I'm sure is traditional, what I'm sure is authentic, and anything in between, I guess. Probably authentic or probably tradition. It's like the Garden Tomb. There's nothing about the Garden Tomb that's right. Nothing, archaeologically or historically. There's nothing. But people like it, and it's pretty, and we want to go there. And maybe it's just in case you're wrong, Bert. And I'm not going to look it up. I just want to go there because I want to have my experience and I want confirmed what I've believed all along, and that is the Garden Tomb is the right place. I don't want to change my mind based on facts. Don't confuse me with the facts. So, I mean, if you've got that mindset, you're going to run into problems with me both here in the States and in Israel and Palestine, because I mean, my job is not to sell you anything. My job is to tell you what I've learned and then let you look for yourself.
Well, I think
Bert,
you're right. And
something,
people, go ahead, Dale.
I was going to say something that I like about the pilgrimage I've been on is that I'm presented facts, options, but I'm not told what I need to believe. And some of those facts and options are completely different than what I have grown up with and learned and believed for myself. But you give me an opportunity to at least hear a different position, and I can make up my mind whether I accept that or not.
Yeah, I mean, everybody checks their own validity.
When you were talking earlier, I remember a couple that went with us, and we were going up to this little coffee shop at the Garden of Gethsemane. And there was a couple who was there who had been at odds with you on some things that you talked about, and you started talking about the Garden of Gethsemane, and I don't remember what your conversation was, but he looked at you and to his wife and says, he's already messed up all these other things. Let's leave so we don't have to hear what he has to say now. And they walked off because they didn't want to have to hear the possibility of an option that might be different than what they had in their own belief set.
There you go.
Yeah. I mean, it must have looked to them like that I tried to mess up every stop. But the problem is what I did was I studied like crazy for every stop. And they didn't.
Exactly.
Because if they had, they'd have known that on some of that stuff, at least, maybe the majority of it, maybe most of it, I was telling them the truth.
Yeah.
I was giving them facts and I wasn't messing up too much.
Well, I think you have been doing that all your life, messing up people's theology. That's what you do.
Way to go,
You did to me. And you continue to do it.
That's not my goal. My goal is to tell the truth. It may have messed up your theology, but
Yeah.
what am I supposed to do?
I get it. But I think too, that people go to the Holy Land for the experience. I think you're right in that. And so if they want to go, to the Jordan River, or want to go to the Sea of Galilee or whatever,
That's great. I'll take them.
or they want to go to the place where Jesus walked, song, I walked where Jesus.
I can show you some places that I believe Jesus
They
walked.
want to walk in the footsteps and they want to have a good shout of hallelujah and praise Jehovah. I walked where Jesus walked.
Yes.
People want that experience. So
Yes.
when you come with the history and all the education around, that is not what it said
What
the
some
Bible.
people want.
Yeah, and so they want that experience. And so the couple that Dale was talking about perhaps went there with intention to have this experience of what they've heard all their lives. That, this is the tree that Zacchaeus, I want to take a picture by this tree so everybody can see. And, he was short and look at me. Oh, people want that. I want that experience too, but it's like not to the detriment of the truth. You know what I'm saying? So I think you have this, you have to deal with the homogeneous of this balance of what do you want the truth or you just want an experience? If you want to just live for the day and have a good shout and, speak in tongues and all, that is what we live for. But if you start coming with all this stuff that I've never heard, and you're trying to mess with my theology with this stuff and tell me that Jesus didn't walk there or this didn't happen there, I don't want to hear that because that's not true. That can't be true.
Well, it's just like, I would say, put a well in the middle of a field over there and tell me that's where Jesus met the woman by the well. I'd
Then
love
you wouldn't
that.
know any better.
I would love it. I
Right.
would love it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you're telling me this, I got the feel of it. I got, Jesus is actually talking to this woman and, she turns around and she becomes a different person. That's fine with me. I
Well,
mean,
it's
it might
not-
be 4 blocks down, but
Especially if we can sit on the well,
Yes.
I'm
It's-
sitting where Jesus sat.
It's serendipitous that you brought up It's serendipitous that you brought up the well, because that's one of the most attested sites over there that we know that's authentic. And the reason is because you can't fake a water source like that in exactly where it's supposed to be, at the depth that it's supposed to be, at the age that it's supposed to be, venerated for 2,000 years or more as it's supposed to be. And there's nothing else around that competes with it. There is no other well like that. So, I can sit you on that well, but I can't put you in the trees at his time. And that's the difference. And I'm glad you brought up that well, because that's a place where I can say he sat here. This is the same spot. This is that well. This is Jacob's well. This is where the Samaritan woman came to draw water in the middle of the day. And this is where Jesus was sitting.
Yeah.
And I would stay there all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, where Jesus was baptized, in the River Jordan.
I can take you there too.
Have you been baptized again there?
I've never been baptized again, but that's a whole different study.
You have
Jesus was never sprinkled.
you have reaffirmed
gotta
the
be
baptism from the Jordan River.
What about the Jordan River?
I said you have reaffirmed your baptism at the Jordan River.
Oh, for sure, and many other places.
Now, see, that'd be something I would love to do. I would.
Yeah, that's very meaningful for people to be able to touch that water.
Yeah, go in the same water.
There's something about the waters, everywhere we go, there's something about the Dead Sea, there's something about the Sea of Galilee, there's something about the Jordan River.
I was just talking to the kids about that here about a month ago. I would love to be rebaptized in the Jordan before I die. I really would.
Well, we'd love for you to go with us.
Are you telling me no?
I'll be shouting all over the place.
Oh,
You can-
hallelujah, Mama,
you can-
yes.
You can affirm your baptism in the Jordan River. You can't get rebaptized.
Well, I'm not reaffirmed.
Because once you're baptized, you're baptized.
I know, that's very true. I understand that. I misspoke. I'm very sorry, Dale. I'll do it again.
You can't be partially baptized.
Sheila,
It's
What?
like-
go and sin no more.
Okay, thank you. I'll try not to anyway.
Go and sin some more. Go ahead.
Okay.
Gene, have you
To Israel one time.
been? Yeah.
One
And
time.
I've said for 30 years, I won't go back unless it's in a minivan with Bert Gary in it.
I agree.
I've got no
Nice.
interest in getting on a bus with a bunch of preachers
Yeah.
and yahoos who don't know what they're doing. I don't want to get on a bus on a good day, but a small group serious about studying. I'm just grateful that Disney hasn't got hold of the Holy Land, turned it into an Epcot for religious crazy people.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of Disney World, it's like Six Flags over Jerusalem or whatever, but
Jesus, yeah.
they had planned a park, and it was funded and everything. They planned a park on the Sea of Galilee where they had a plexiglass cleared platform that would come up under the water almost to the surface so that you could walk on the water and have your picture taken for $20.
He did that at Camp Wesley Pines
Wow.
one year with tables. The water was brown and I had a brown folding table under the water on concrete blocks.
It must have looked pretty cool.
It looked really, really cool.
Well, this would have looked cool too, but it would have turned the Sea of Galilee into a marketplace for sure.
Yeah.
Not that it's not already commercial enough,
Six
but
flags over Jesus.
Six Flags over Jesus, yes.
You
Should
know, they
be
have a place in
seven, right?
Orlando.
7 flags.
Hey, Bert, look at my background now.
The well, yeah, that's the well. See the bucket over his shoulder,
Mhm.
Yeah.
rope going down to it?
Oh, yeah.
There's a hole in.
Okay, that bucket is sitting in a container. That's not the well. The well is right behind it beneath, just to the right of the cup and behind the bucket.
Looks like a house to me.
Well, I mean, it's just that little thing right there is the well beneath.
I got you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a little square cube of rock that's been carved away, at the
Yeah.
top. But that's beneath the altar of a church in Nablus.
And that's the actual site?
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I'll sit there then. Wow.
Yeah, let's just go there all day.
Well, I said, let's plan a trip. You know, Jean, if you're not going, except Bert goes. I've never been, Sheila's never been. I mean,
haven't
let's
been.
do it. Let's just plan a trip. Here, have you been to Israel?
Let's go on Dale's. He's going on Christmas Day. He's
You're
gonna be in Bethlehem for Christmas Eve service.
Wow.
It's his trip. I mean, he's not even doing it with SBS. He's just doing a trip.
There you go, Bert.
Oh yeah, that's looking down the well.
Okay. Wow.
And it's way deeper than it looks right there in that picture, because it looks like it only goes down about 8 feet in that picture, but that's just the darkness.
It's
That little
120
flicker of
feet.
light at the bottom, that little tiny circle and flicker of light. Yeah, about 90 feet down, that's the bottom.
It's 120.
Oh, wow.
It's a lot.
120?
Yeah, it's 120.
Gee, that's deep.
I can be your virtual tour guide here.
Yeah, man, you know your stuff.
Wow. No wonder Jesus asked that question. You came to run, you don't have anything to draw with?
So, I mean, it's interesting that the same, Gino, the same thing that we talked about this morning.
Yep.
Y'all should watch that conversation. It lasted about an hour, less than an hour, because we were kind of slow getting rolling. And we usually end on time, but doggone, these are connected. These just connected all by themselves. Who do you trust? How do you know? How long has this been going on? When did traditions get started? Why are they untrue so many times? And why do we think they're right? And who, you know, there's, and going forward, I mean, do you trust Bert? Who do you trust for accurate information in the Holy Land or here about the Bible? You know, that's the crisis of the United Methodist Church and of the modern era. It's an exegetical crisis. We
No, we
know-
want to feel the moment so much that we'll believe anything that we're
That's
told.
unfortunate. That's unfortunate.
Yeah.
I
To
hope
me,
that's true.
Sheila, one of the existential questions is, in all these cases, who benefits from the way it is? And if somebody benefits financially because of selling knickknacks or a kickback because I went to this tomb as opposed to that tomb, if somebody benefits, then you have to really suspect it. And that's true whether it's an interpretation of the Bible, a stop in the Holy Land, or a political theological position for church.
There was a crisis on this issue, Gene, that I just thought of as you were talking. That's an example of that. Isn't it the whole greatest Artemis, Diana, the Ephesians? You know, in the book of Acts, where Paul has been preaching against idols, and suddenly sales went down at the stores where you could buy the goddesses, the statues for Artemis, and they had a protest march, and they were shouting, "Great is Artemis of the Ephesians." When they got all the way to the the theater, which sat thousands of people, they brought in the ruler, and they were going to bring in Paul, but they brought in some of the other Christians. They talked Paul into not going because they were afraid they'd kill him. And they kind of put him on trial for hurting local business by telling people that gods are not real. It hurts business to tell the truth. It keeps business going if you keep telling people the traditions that they expect and want to hear. And that's what tourism does over there. It just keeps fueling those traditions.
Bird has single-handedly cut down the sales on large-scale manger scenes.
I hope so.
You know, with involving inappropriate wise men, donkeys that don't belong, shepherds out of place who brought sheep.
No, I don't
All
care
you
about
can do is sell Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. You can't make a profit on that.
No, you can't. And I'm really, it's fine with me for us to keep our manger scenes. I think they're beautiful. But, you know, maybe what we should do is, you know, put a little battery and a little LED sign in there that you can, you know, like program the words and, you know, and just put little pithy sayings on the side, like wise men were not actually here, you know?
The last time we talked about the manger.
Yeah.
That this wasn't there, that wasn't. My manger that I got from Jerusalem I got all the animals and I got the wise men, the whole 9 yards I got. So I took them all out of there. I left Mary and Joseph and the baby right there. And I got sand around the others. They're just all wandering.
Okay. Well, you gotta put them somewhere.
Yeah, you know, I wasn't gonna throw them away. So they're all wandering through the house.
But Bert, you make a good point because, you know, tourism and tradition is still just as valuable in the Middle East as it was.
Economically, yes.
Yeah, it is. People believe things, whether they're true or not, because it's been a tradition passed on from basically generation to generation. I was listening to XM radio a couple of weeks ago. There's a time in the afternoon where they do acoustic Christian praise music. And this particular artist, this is in Nashville, wrote a song about what the innkeeper was thinking and doing when he denied the position or place for Joseph and Mary to have this baby. And his whole song was about an innkeeper, like a motel guy.
Maybe you didn't see my study
Dale
last week.
wasn't, no, he wasn't here. I don't.
Oh, okay. So I got a video full of them.
Of the innkeeper.
Full of
Yes.
them.
Yes.
I'm just saying though, this guy, he says, I want to bring tribute to this innkeeper.
Oh, so did these other songs.
Yep,
It's everywhere.
it's like 10,000 of them.
Oh, it was hilarious.
Yeah.
I thought it was funny too.
No room in the inn.
No room in the inn.
No, gee. That was the message last week.
And
But you
one
know,
of the
but you
preachers
know
said,
the
hey, what's up
problem-
with this innkeeper?
But the problem with the truth that you're,
That night that we talked about that, he ruined my whole Christmas story.
You're welcome.
but you know, I think the statement would be you can't handle the truth because tradition speaks almost louder than truth.
Yeah.
Oh, it really does.
Yeah, you're right.
You know, we know a lot more about Roman crucifixion today than we did before 1968. And when they found Yohanan's bone box in North Jerusalem, you know, in that excavation, and here you got a guy in his 20s who was crucified, and the reason we know is the nail bone is still on his heel, you know, and it's got his name scratched on the side of the box, just like they did for all people back then who were buried in whose bones were placed in ossuaries. And holy cow, we learned a great deal about Roman crucifixion from that, and it corroborated a lot of the Roman records that talk about it as well. And it corroborated the scriptures too, for that matter. Although the scriptures don't give details much about how specifically, where the nails went and that kind of thing. But holy cow, boy, did we have that wrong?
Mhm.
It's not even close to the way Yehohanan, and everybody's like, who's Yehohanan? Every Christian should know that name. He's the only crucified person remains we've ever found in the world. And there's a reason why, by the way. You weren't buried if you were crucified everywhere in the world except in Jerusalem. You could ask for the body to be brought down for holy days and for Sabbath. The Pilate made concessions to their religious sensibilities, and if they wanted the body down off the cross for Passover, that's understandable. I don't want there to be a riot. Take him down, bury him, do what you want to with him.
Mm.
That's the way they handle it. Kia, we're running out of time. I was wondering if you had something to share. You out there, Kia?
I am here. No, I don't have anything to share. I agree.
So you managed somehow to get through the commercialism of Christmas yet another year.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't teach my daughter about Santa Claus and getting free gifts and somebody breaking into your home and setting them there. But I did hear the stories about Mary and Joseph and things, and they were traditional. And if you don't hear anything else, it's what else is there to believe? If you don't hear another version to compare it to, how do you know?
How do you know?
And
I mean, That's the
where we
deal.
get into the, I hate to use the term manipulation, but that's where we kind of get into the manipulation of trusting pastors that you think, okay, you have been anointed to give the word of God in its entirety, in its accuracy, and you know, and as a layman, just a regular parishioner who hasn't made it maybe through the entire Bible, or you have made it and you still don't understand every single solitary piece and point of it, you do have, and I am one of those, you lean on your pastor to guide you. But you also have some of those, and I am one of those that question some of the things that are told to you that just don't quite make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's what this panel is for. You know, we challenge what we're seeing, what we're believing. We discuss what we're interpreting, and we don't expect anybody to agree. Everyone's free to disagree. And that freedom is what makes this group strong. It's not, our differences don't make us weaker. It makes us stronger that we are committed to one another and to this process. And that it means that we don't always agree. If we had to agree before we continued, we just might as well quit.
Because the bottom line is,
Conversations like this don't happen in all churches.
No.
because the bottom line is the person we're talking about knew everybody is being deceived all over the place and said, he said, the truth will set you free.
Mhm.
And so we can simply try to focus on the truth the best that we possibly can.
Yeah.
Preach, Mike, preach.
Yeah,
It helps that he is the truth. If we can understand him as the
he
truth,
is the truth. Yeah,
then we're moving in the right direction together, you know,
yeah,
as followers of his.
And don't be afraid to look for the truth.
right.
Yeah.
And to question it. I mean, question, when.
There's
in
nothing
doubt.
wrong with asking questions. There's just not.
Mhm.
But the anxiety gets so high, people get really afraid, oh, my preacher said this, and, I got to go with this, and rather than listening to whatever your instinct may be,
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, when I'm preaching or teaching, I tell people, you look it up. Don't just take my word for it. You look it up,
and Bert does that too, and I'm sure
Mhm.
Gene too.
I wish that it didn't upset people. I'm still surprised when it does, like the couple that you were talking about, Dale. I was really surprised, and they turned around and gave me, all fives on my evaluation, and I was expecting to get all zeros or ones. So I'm like, how can they hate everything that I say at every stop and then give me fives? I don't get that. But maybe they changed their mind over the course of the 2 weeks. I don't know. I don't have any idea, but I'm not doing it to upset people. I'm not looking for things that are different from what I know people believe. I'm as surprised the first time I see this stuff as anybody. But the point is not that I need to avoid upsetting you. The point is, I need to tell you what I found. And if it upsets you, why is that my problem?
Mhm.
I just told you what I found. I'm not trying to hurt you.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to lie to you. I'm not trying to mislead you, manipulate you, or get your money. All I'm trying to do is tell you what I learned.
I hear you. Keep doing it, preacher.
That's what everybody needs to do. Gina, what you got on your heart and mind? You good? Okay.
What was
No
that
trouble.
song you were about to sing, Gene?
Say again.
What was that song you were about to sing?
Oh, I was just teasing earlier about I was born under a wandering star.
I haven't heard that one.
You don't know that song? Paint
No.
Your Wagon?
Mm-mm.
Lee Marvin.
Oh, Paint Your Wagon. I've seen that musical.
I used that for a sermon title one time talking about the wise men.
Yeah. By the way, Sheila, your husband, Bob, has written, thank you for sharing this. My wife is participating in this event.
Mhm.
So we've all been notified that you are participating in this event. It's official because Bob did it, because Bob is in charge and he's large and in charge. And he's made sure that everyone knew.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
He also said he was going to throw away your
There you
unused
go.
maintenance.
Hey.
Bob,
Good to see you.
I don't know if the
See you,
good
honey.
Lord
Good to
is
see you,
punishing
Bob.
me or what.
Hello, Jim.
Hey, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Hey, Bert.
You're the man, Bob. You the man.
Hello.
Hang up that manger scene.
I hope you all have a blessed evening. Thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you on Sunday.
And y'all, let's go to the Holy Land, okay? Let's plan a trip.
Well, the next time that
and,
I teach, whether y'all go or not, the next time I teach, we're planning to take her. So just, we'll let you know when I'm going back.
Oh, yeah.
Bug says she'll catch you next week.
February the 8th.
Sounds good, Sheila.
I hope you all have a great evening. Bye-bye, everybody.
Good night.
Call me, Gene.
Bye-bye.
Holler at you tomorrow, Dale.